Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Double 18 Podcast Livestream. I'm your host, Stephen Nagishi. Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to our show. Tonight, I'm very welcome. I'm very, very honored, to have this guest back on our show. We've had him previously about maybe a little over a year ago around the NFL draft time. It is none other than the John Vogel, I'm sorry, with a GEL. My apologies for the
No
spelling
worries.
title there. But John, good evening. Happy New Year to you. Thanks for joining us once again.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invite and the opportunity.
Well, thank you so much. And we have a lot to talk about in terms of the NFL draft, which is your expertise. And let me start off with something a little bit different. I saw your post on Twitter, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of days ago. You were thanking your journey to get to where you are, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken. Now, because I'm technically still at work right now, I'm not allowed to access the X account by rule. But John, for those who are not really familiar with your work, or at least been following you, some of the people on Twitter, as you can see, they're at Draft Vogel. Can you give us your journey, or how you got your start into becoming like a draft expert and where you are today?
Yeah. So a couple days ago, I had done a post. It was extreme. That's exactly I think the phrase I used was extreme gratitude because I'm so blessed to be in this opportunity where I could talk to so many people in the league, so many players, the relationships that I've been able to build with people in the media as well. And sometimes, when you kind of sit back and you look at a long journey, a long story, you kind of realize, man, this has been quite a wild ride. This is kind of nuts. And so
Hmm.
there was kind of one of those moments for me, um, that I kind of had, and I was like, just, when you go from I was a nobody, I didn't know anybody in the league, I'm totally self-made, and my family wasn't involved in football. I didn't have an uncle that worked on a football team. Nobody played college football in my family. No one really played high school either in my family. And it was just a passion that I knew I had to turn into my career. And so I started working at this. I started scouting in 2016. Um, really just kind of evaluating prospects. I wanted to get into writing and covering the NFL. And I was watching, ESPN highlights and such, of like, Mel Kiper Jr. and Todd McShay and
Right.
those guys. And I was seeing that they were wrong a lot. And I was like, oh, so I have to watch the players myself, apparently.
Hmm.
And as my 20, I think I was 20, maybe 19 at the time. I thought I knew everything. Learned very quickly that I don't. And so it kind of became this like really cool learning experience because it humbles yourself. You have to humble yourself to realize what you don't know.
Hmm.
And for evaluating prospects, I realized that it is hard. It is hard to project them going from college to pro, and I wanted to get better at it. And so that's what the path that I ended up taking. And then in 2018, I had a very unfortunate series of events that led to I was homeless. I was living in the back of my car, and I was working temp jobs, and working at a staying outside of McDonald's, using the Wi-Fi to continue writing articles and just kind of like keep the dream alive. And
Hmm.
to go from that to the next year, I was credentialed media and I was out of the streets. I was living in my own place again. And to here we are 6 years later, looking back, it's like this has been such an incredible journey. The people that I've met have been incredible. I could have told myself 7, 8 years ago that I'd be in this position right now, I don't think I would have believed myself. And so that's not just a testimony to me, that's a testimony that people have believed in me. I've had a lot of followers that have followed me for a long time and
Right.
continue to, critique and to digest my work. And because they believed in me, that allowed other people to find me. And here I am today.
So, you don't have experience playing football,
Hmm.
even on a high school level, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay,
Hmm.
so for maybe there's a bit of a misconception. People like even Mel Kiper certainly um, didn't have a football background, but he always knew this is what he wanted to do. I remember reading an article on him on the old SI, like maybe more than 30 years ago, back in 1992, about how he was always hounding people at the old Baltimore Colts when it was still the Baltimore Colts, and he was always passing out scouting reports to anybody in the within the organization, which kind of impressed, I believe, then general manager Ernie Accorsi. I
Hmm.
remember reading that story. And for somebody, even like me, or even anybody who's watching this live stream, or anybody who wants to kind of break into this industry without any knowledge or having played a single down of a football on any level, what's the best way to kind of learn, or how did you learn or picked up about the arts of scouting, and what's the best thing you can do for average Joe like me?
Well, I think the first thing is, and I don't use this word, to, I don't want to overuse the word, but the biggest thing is you have to humble yourself and
Hmm.
realize that there's a lot of people that know a lot more than you do. That's the first step.
Okay.
Um, I think the real wake up call to me, understanding that there was a lot I didn't know about the sport, was the very first game that I covered. It was the 2019 Music City Bowl. Louisville played Mississippi State.
Hmm.
Downtown Nashville, beautiful day. Weather was
Yeah.
awesome. Um, I was on the sideline and wide-eyed as you could imagine, first time stepping into, on the field level, the Titans stadium, and you know, I run into the scout who worked for the Steelers,
Hmm.
and he kind of took me under his wing that day and started introducing me to the people, the other scouts, the other coaches, and people on the sideline. And it was a Mark Gorsak who now works for the Senior Bowl. He started the 40-yard dash at the combine for 20 plus years.
Hmm.
Um, but as I was sitting there, well, I was standing there in this little circle. It was me, it was a couple Titan scouts, and it was the Mississippi State defensive line coach. And they started talking about some of the players playing on that line at Mississippi State. I was totally out of my depth. I had no idea what 90% of that conversation was that they were talking about. Because if you ever heard defensive line jargon and you don't know what you're talking about, it sounds like a foreign language.
Hmm.
And that's what it sounded like to me. And that's when I realized I need to sit here and I need to listen and I need to study this. I am way over my head. There's a lot that I have to learn. So the best advice I think I can give to anybody trying to break in who hasn't played is when you go to these events,
Hmm.
uh, if you can first get your foot in the door, that's the biggest thing. But when you get an opportunity to just talk to somebody, pick their brain, you know? Don't come in there and try to impress them and be like, yeah, I know about football, because you probably don't.
Right.
Because I definitely did. That's for damn sure. Um, but you want to go into these things, you want to listen, and you want to just take it all in and soak it all in. And that's the best thing too, because there's a lot of guys in this industry that are really, really good. And they just want to help you. They want to help everybody succeed. It helps the sport for everyone to succeed. And especially in the art of scouting, you want to keep the human element of scouting alive. And there is an art to it. So it's passing on the art. It's appreciating the art that it is. And uh, the best way to learn it is to just listen and shut your mouth, be quiet, and listen. And I think that's the best way to do it.
Hmm. So, of all the years that you started scouting, and you kind of got your break now, and then now you're doing a draft sick podcast, which is part of the
Hmm.
Adam Rank sick network, because obviously
Yeah.
I'm a Bears fan, and I follow Adam on Twitter a lot. And how did you ended up with the Adams network, and what was like the moment you feel like, okay, now I felt like I made it here now?
Yeah, it has to be. So the Sick Podcast, they have a really great group of people in Canada that own it and operate it. AC and Sammy Cavallari, I think is how you say their last name. I apologize, guys, if I said your name wrong. I call them, that's why we call them AC and Sammy. And
Hmm.
Sammy has a very rare condition that's put him in a wheelchair. It's made him to 100% disabled, but he had this vision of creating a podcast network, and they got to know Adam Rank, and Rank got involved and started the Rank show over there, and then they started branching out and adding all these other shows. They've got one of the more successful hockey shows in the industry
Right.
for regular hockey and draft. They have a bunch of team, specific shows, and so what happened was I got invited on. I think it was their Steelers show. It was hosted at the time. I think Mike Nikowski was hosting it, and I got done doing it. And the producers, the owners, AC and Sammy, come on. They're like, we got to get you, on a show on here. And at the time, I kind of had a lot of different, shows and websites and different things that I was trying to work on. And I said, it's gonna be really hard. That's a lot of time. I don't know if I have it. And so they just started inviting me on all the other team shows. I did the Colts, I did the Titans, I did a couple others, and every single time they're like, "Hey, man, we got to get you a show. We got to get you a show. Like, you got to come on here, be our draft guy." And so I finally bought in. I'm really glad I did. They've been a great network. Adam's an awesome guy. I love Adam. We did the Bears draft series last year, looking at players that they could potentially target with their couple picks. We hit them. We got them. In Rome and Caleb. So it's been a blessing. I think that was the moment that I think I realized I made it. To answer the second part of that is probably after at this past year at the Senior Bowl. Um, Last year was the third year I've done the Senior Bowl. This year I'm going down there here in about a week and a half. That'll be my fourth year. And I got down there, and the number of people that stopped and just to introduce themselves to me, um, and to network and just to put a face to the name, it was kind of mind blowing a little bit, where I kind of sat back and I didn't realize that all these people read my stuff or knew my name,
Hmm.
would know my face out of a crowd. Um, and that was kind of the moment where it's like, hey, I've made it now. You don't want that to change you. In the military, I'm in the military and stuff. So in the military, we always kind of have this thing where people change their personalities when they acquire rank. And that's always a bad thing. Usually a bad thing because you
Right.
see guys, become overly egotistical or thinking that they're better than everybody because they got their, E6 and they got an extra rocker on their rank now. You don't want to be that guy. And so that was kind of hey, I need to settle back, stay down here with everybody else, and be the same guy that I've always been. Um, and just take a couple minutes for everybody that comes up and really just try to connect with people, because that's how I've always done it.
This may be a little bit of a loaded question before we move on to the meat of things.
Mhm.
If myself or anybody else is watching this, or somebody who watches this in the future wants to kind of delve into the game further from your past experience, is there any particular book or website or anything like that you've watched it, whether it's the video or even a YouTube channel, like you kind of honed your skills or gained more depth into learning football?
Yeah, I think the first step is you want to read the Guide to Scouting Football by Bill Belichick's father. I believe his name's Stephen Belichick.
Hmm.
This was published in the 50s, so it's a little outdated, but it was the first, guide to scouting. It was the first time anybody kind of sat down and said, "Here's how you do it. Here's what you're looking for," and it's a master class in just the philosophy and understanding what you're looking at.
Hmm.
Um, the second thing is you want to listen to people who have either been in the front office or they played in the game. And I would recommend the GM Shuffle, that was hosted by Michael Lombardi, but he's gone now. He's back in North Carolina, so that podcast doesn't exist
Right.
anymore. But Inside the League with Neil Stratton, and I think I can't think of the other guy's name on there. That's a really good one. That Neil knows everybody in the league essentially that's ever scouted.
Right.
He's got a few former scout on there with him. They really kind of break stuff down. That's a really good one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Watching the quarterback school with JT O'Sullivan is a really
Uh-huh.
good one to kind of understand the quarterback and the position. So just listen to people who have played the game,
Mm-hmm.
that know how to play in the different positions,
Mm-hmm.
and or have coached it, and done, coached it successfully. That's really the best way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know JT and Tim Jenkins has their own popular
Hmm.
websites, and they even have their so-called courses. Um did you pay for those, or would you even recommend if you can even would you like recommend it? If you have a few bucks laying around your, or if you want to kind of like delve into that a little bit
And
more further into it.
I think there's some good things you could get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it just kind of depends on your budget, what you
Yeah.
got. Like, don't break your bank, trying to get in, with that stuff, because there's enough stuff that's free out there
Right.
that you can pick up on a lot. Um, I didn't, and that's more
Okay.
so because I was blessed with the opportunity to get to know one of the more influential scouts that walked in the last couple of decades,
That's right. Yeah.
that knows everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So that was sort of that was a blessing that I got,
Yeah.
that that you don't normally have.
Right.
So I was kind of able to just kind of pick his brain with that. But there's other people too. Twitter's great, or X, I guess, whatever we're calling it now, is great. For networking, for connecting with people. I've talked with Greg Gabriel on there, who has been a general personnel director, like privately. Picking his brain about how do you look at
That's
this
true.
position. Randy Mueller. People like
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
where you just you see, and then you watch these people also interact with each other, and there's a lot. You always want to approach every opportunity with, what can I learn from this, what can I take from it, and that's kind of what I've always tried to do. I love to learn. That's why I have so many different interests. um because when it comes to theology, any type of religion type theology, I love studying the different mythology, philosophy, history, psychology is very interesting. So just, it's because it's all about learning, and it all applies to different aspects of your life. Football applies to everything, I think, in your life. So with the things that you learn from football, it applies to philosophy, it applies to psychology, it applies to the way that you approach situations and how you deal with people. That's all stuff that football also teaches you how to manage. So you really just want to take every opportunity to learn. And hey, just because you disagree with the guy that's on there, that's on Twitter, that's arguing about, he's put his opinion out there, but hey, he's done it. He's been there. He worked, Greg Gabriel, I know, gets a lot of flack on here for being a hot tempered guy,
Yeah, as a
but
Bears fan, I know I follow him, and he's a very competitive person.
yeah,
My live stream podcast, sorry for interrupting, but kind of began with the Barroom Network, based out of Chicago, founded and started by Aldo Gandia, and he does a weekly show. Still to this day, with Greg Gabriel as a host, and obviously Greg offers his insights as a scout and front office guy. So, and he can be very, very competitive. So that's,
very,
like you
yeah,
said,
no,
it's very understandable too.
he's an aggressive guy, absolutely, and he gets into it with people on Twitter. I see it all the time. But that's a guy that's done it. He
Yeah.
did it for 20 years. So while you know while it's easy to sit there and disagree with them and say, oh, well, you're not working in that front office for a reason anymore, no, there's some things you can learn from this guy, who's been there, who's done it. He's done it at a high level.
Sure.
They went to Super Bowls while he was there. I think a Super Bowl, right, in 2006, they were
Yeah,
in the
he went to
playoffs.
Super Bowl with the Bears back in 2006, I believe. Yes.
Yeah, so he's been there at a high level. I know they had playoff runs there too while he was
That's
there.
right. That's right.
So he's done it at a high level. It's very hard to win in the NFL, and there are things that you can definitely learn from him.
My guest tonight is NFL draft expert John Vogel. John, let's get to the actual conversation about the this year's upcoming draft. Um, I'm hearing, stuff like this year's draft isn't as, strong as maybe the years past. Where do you stand on this year's draft and this upcoming draft in April? What is the strength and weakness of this position, position wise, in
Yeah.
this year's draft?
Yeah. So I think when we talk about top heavy class, top end talent, it's a little bit weak. There's not a lot of guys that I would sit here and say, I feel really good about this guy going first round, or I feel really good about, this guy being an instant starter. So I think that's kind of the first. Yes, it is not as top heavy of a class as we've seen, but the other side, the flip side of that is there is a ton of talent. When you start
Hmm.
getting into the different position groups, there's a lot of them that are deep. The ones that stand out to me, I think running back is very deep this year.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of really good ones. And that's kind of where you start to get into how many do we see go first round because of the lack of overall talent, of top heavy talent. You get running backs that start to push up the board a little bit. There's two or three that could potentially go up there. I guess two really now because Nick Singleton decided to go back to school for a year
Right.
out of Penn State. But Ashton G&T's up there. Amarian Hampton on North Carolina's up there. So you start to get into that running back class. You're sitting there like, there's a lot of really good talent here. I think that your defensive line looks really good. There's a lot of good edge rushers. There's a lot of good, really, it's on the great nose tackles. Guys that are 320 plus pounds that could play that one tech position lined up in between the center and the guard. That's great. There's a lot of depth there. There's a lot of really good players there. And the defensive tackle, there's quite a few there as well. I've liked a lot of guys at those position groups. And then corner looks like it's a pretty deep class this year as well. And even into the safeties a little bit. There's some hybrid guys that could kind of play that rover, nickel defensive back, safety / hybrid guy. Um, those are the deepest position groups I've seen up to this point. Now,
Hmm.
where you start to get weak, your quarterback class is not great this year.
Hmm.
Um, if you need a quarterback this year, man, I'm sorry. Like, there's a reason we saw 6 guys go in the first 12 picks last year because we knew
Yeah.
we had this class coming. And no one really solidified themselves. It's kind of like you could say Shador did a lot to help himself, right? But there's still question marks about him. As in, all right, let's say he doesn't get paired up with Dion. I mean, there's a slight chance that could happen with the Dallas Cowboys position open right now, the head coach, and supposedly they're talking. That's something that I talked about happening 3 months ago. Because I've been hearing just the rumor mill going and people talking
Yeah.
about it, and this is the one that makes the most sense if he's going to go anywhere in the NFL. But so there's Dallas, and what is also interesting, not to get off on a tangent here or anything, but just an interesting little tidbit about that. All the Shrine Bowl this year is being held at Arlington.
Right.
All the Colorado players are going to the Shrine Bowl. Not a single one is going to the Senior Bowl in Mobile. You think that there's a reason for that? Interesting.
Yeah.
Just saying. The second, so the quarterback class is not great. Shador has his question marks because it's like, okay,
Right.
how's he going to do separated from his dad for the first time?
Hmm.
What kind of upside are we talking about there with this guy?
Yeah.
Has he really maxed out his potential? Is there anything that we can really tap into here? Whereas Cam Ward, you're sitting there going, Cam's a guy, he can make incredible plays. He
Sure.
makes some throws and improving, extending a play that I sit there and I'm marveled by. But then he'll turn right around the next play and make the stupidest throw I've ever seen, trying to replicate that play. So with Cam, you have to live with the mistakes and hope that he makes up for it.
Sure.
That's a risky pick. And then Jalen Milroe's total project.
Hmm.
If he can develop his passing, then great. So your quarterback class is weak. Your offensive line class this year is not great. There's not a really good offensive tackle that I'm sitting here feeling really good about solidifying my left side. People
Hmm.
talked about Will Campbell. There's going to be a really, really heavy debate about this Campbell. Is he going to be better fitted inside at
Right.
guard? He plays very upright, and that's while his initial hand placement's really good, sometimes you see He doesn't hold up very well to second moves. He doesn't hold up well to speed around the outside because his
Hmm.
feet look like they're a little heavy. They're probably a little oversized for his frame. He's got very big feet. And so that makes it harder for him to move at times. And that upright playing style is scary, because when you're that upright, people can bend and dip under you, and you see that happen to him a
Yeah.
lot. Um, so there's not a really great offensive tackle I feel good about. Guard is a little bit better. There's
Yeah.
some second, third round talents that'll go, but it's still not a great class. And then I think your wide receiver class isn't that great either. There's a couple of guys up at the top, but from top to bottom, there's not a lot of guys that I see making a huge impact.
Hmm. So, as a Bears fan, this past year was a disaster, and one of the positions certainly that needs to be given a significant amount of attention, of course, is the offensive line. The
Yeah.
tackle may not be as a much of a need. I like what Darnell Wright has done, even though
Hmm.
he does get a little bit of criticism. And then he did look like he kind of play through some pains this year. I'm very confident in him as a right tackle. The left tackle is a bit of a question mark with Braxton Jones. For a guy who was drafted fifth round, he's turned into a very good player, but not exactly what you call a somebody you want, protecting Caleb Williams's blind side for, another 5-10 years per se. And he's also coming off an injury that looked like it was a serious one, but still, he will look like going to be spending this entire offseason rehabbing.
Hmm.
Of all the tackles that are available, Bears are picking 10. Who would be a good pick? Would you just say, you know what, forget tackle, we'll just get somebody else? And if so, what position of need do you see with the Bears at maybe at number 10?
Well, I know I just talked downward on Will Campbell a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, but I do project him going first round, and here's why. Because
Yeah.
I think what you're going to see is a ambitious offensive line coach is going to look at his tape, is going to see massive potential because there is massive potential there with Will Campbell.
Right.
Um, and think, yeah, I can refine this guy. I can get him to play at a much higher level because if he can fix specifically his anchor, he's got
Yeah.
issues with, especially when he's dealing with speed. He leans in and he bends his waist. When you bend your waist as a tackle, you lose your leverage a lot easier because it's just like when you're running. If you talk to anybody who's a track coach,
Hmm.
they'll tell you to keep your back straight when you run. And the reason for that is because if your back is bent, you lose power. Your spine, uh, when it's straight, you can lean it forward and that's how you could gather a little bit more speed, especially in track. You see certain runners run low and they get a forward lean going when they start to accelerate. That's why. The same thing kind of applies to power. If your back is crooked, it's almost like it's going to catch a little bit of your a little extra resistance. You also lose some of your hip power. So it gives you, it puts you in a really bad spot sometimes. So
Hmm.
that's where Campbell struggles, is he'll bend at his waist when he starts to feel like he's getting beat because that's how he reaches. You want him to bend at his knees. So an ambitious offensive line coach, it really depends who Chicago hires as their head coach and brings in onto the staff. If you have a guy that feels like he can coach anybody, he could fix anybody, Will Campbell's going to be the guy.
Hmm.
If he's sitting there at 10, which he very well could be.
Give me keys.
Now,
Car. Oh, RV.
Excuse me.
no, you're good. I get you. Um,
These damn noises.
the other guy that potentially I feel decently good about playing left tackle is not a guy that I would probably take at 10, and that would be Arante Irsay out of Minnesota.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Yeah.
he's fun. He's going down in Mobile. I think he's going to have a great week, and you're going to see his stock per se kind of explode.
Hmm.
Um, that's a guy that I feel really good about, but not quite that high. I guess if you had to, you could do it. Now, Chicago, from a need standpoint, at least how I'm looking at it, um, it really depends on the free agent market.
That's
But
true. That's true. Yeah.
I think a defensive end wouldn't be a terrible idea. Um, yeah,
In the draft.
yes,
Okay.
I understand you got Montez Sweat, you moved
Right.
a lot of capital for him, and
Sure.
I get that. I do get that. But you're going to lose Jacob Martin and Darrell Taylor next year is what I'm tracking.
That's true. That's
Um,
true. Yeah.
Austin Booker's flashed, but he's really a rotational guy.
Yeah.
DeMarcus Walker,
He's a
probably,
rotational guy too. Yeah.
yeah, he's probably better suited inside. If you could get a pass rusher in there, that would
Mm,
mask a lot of your defensive deficiencies. It helps unlock Sweat on the other side and
true.
really gets him going. Um,
Yeah.
I
This
was
is a
waiting.
very deep, strong class of edge
Hmm.
rushers, as you can see here. I know a lot of Bears fans are probably dreaming about Abdul Carter, but
Not
I
going to
think
be
he
there
might
10.
go top 3 or 4 at worst.
Yeah.
So one of the couple of guys that I'm very intrigued by is Nick Scourton of Texas A&M.
Yeah.
He's a pretty big body guy. I know somebody said that he might be better off moving into inside.
Hmm.
Do you like Scourton at maybe 10 for the Bears, or do you have another edge rusher you feel like the Bears can do better than Nick Scourton?
No, I think that Scourton would be a really good pick. And I was taking a look at him just the other night, actually, and really
Mm-hmm.
starting to dive deep into his game. He got a great plan when he goes into a rep. Very violent, strong hands. And he's a very, very good athlete. You wouldn't guess he's 280 watching him on film.
Right.
He plays closer to 260. So he moves really well. He's probably going to test out the wazoo. Um, Now, James Pierce Jr. would also not be a bad pick, and here's why.
Oh, okay.
If you look at the trends at the defensive end position that Chicago kind of looks for, 33-inch arms, 1.7 10-yard split,
Mm-hmm.
explosiveness, 30 vertical, 10 foot broad. They like him right there in that 6'3", 240 range.
Right.
Um, that's Pierce.
Mm-hmm.
And Pierce is extreme. Pierce is a very talented athletic pass rusher who I'm not saying this because I live in Tennessee and I bleed orange. I'm not saying that because I didn't like him as a first round pick coming into the year. I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But this year he was really a difference maker coming off that edge. He paces his rush very well, and
Mm-hmm.
he is a very special athlete. So you think about him on one side and Sweat on the other. Now you can get uh, Austin Booker and DeMarcus Walker into that rotation. Now you're talking about a 8-man front.
Right.
You can really start to bring pressure. You can really start to alleviate some of that stress on your defense. And then try to address your left tackle either in free agency or maybe take a pot shot in the second round.
That's true. There are a couple of players playing on the same school that is ranked here. Let's start with Georgia. Jalen Walker and Michael Williams. Who do you like as a player? Regardless of whether he fits the Bears or not.
Michael Williams, I think, is better overall. He's a lot more explosive. Now, they're both explosive players, but I think Williams really is a lot more explosive. Um, and much more polished and refined as a pass rusher. So one of the things we talk about when we talk about polish is you want to have a plan going into a rep. You have to have a plan. And the reason for that is because your offensive tackle is going to set a certain way.
Right.
You can figure that out watching tape. There's a specific way that they want to play. Usually it's a inside or outside puncher. That's the first thing. Do they like to land their hands inside and lock you into a block, or do they like to squeeze you from the outside and literally kind of hold you in position? If they're an outside puncher, you've got to have a really good inside counter. That's where that's weak. Because you get them out here reaching, they come inside. Now you can play half man. They're going to get in. You've got control of that unless they're absolute brutes. As an inside puncher, This is where your swims, your rips, different things like that typically work better. So you want to have a plan when your first move doesn't work, because if they get a really good if they land their hands on you just the right way, that first move is stymied. So you want to have something in place to come back with the second punch, second count, or the counter to your first move. And a lot of guys just kind of go out there and wing it.
Mhm.
They don't understand the whole processing, building a plan. Michael Williams understands that, and you can see that on tape because he so consistently on his rep goes straight to his second move when he's stymied, and it makes him a lot more efficient as a pass rusher.
Okay. Moving on to Ohio State, Jack Sawyer obviously made the big play that helped
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State get to the national championships on Monday. There's
Yep.
another bookend, JT Tuimoloau, who was a top 5 recruit several years ago. Both are seniors. Of the two, who do you like as a prospect long term?
JT. So Jack, no offense to Jack, he's going to be a good, not great athlete.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And so he's going to have to win more as a technician. He can do it. We've seen him do it. He's been relatively productive at Ohio State.
Right.
Obviously, they're playing for a national title this year. That has a lot to do with how that defensive line is played. That defense in general, really. But
Mhm.
he's a technician. Technicians have a role. There's been great technicians. The thing is, I like guys that are a little bit more athletic, that could do just a little bit more, and that's JT. JT's a much better athlete. He's
Right.
not as polished,
Sure.
but he's polished enough with the way that he kind of sets up his initial attack. I think that JT also famously tore up Olu Fashanu in 2 games and 2 matches, both years that they played each other at Penn State,
Right.
who was an 11th overall pick last year.
With the Jets, yes.
And yes, the Jets. So if I'm in the AFC East, that's my target right there.
Let's move into another position of need for the Bears.
Hmm.
Interior defensive lineman. Obviously, excuse me, the cream of the crop is Mason Graham. He is a terrific player in his own right. Um, Tell me more about Mason Graham and his strength and weakness and how he would fit for the Bears if he was indeed available.
Yeah, so Mason Graham, um, he's an interesting player. He wrestled in high school,
Mm-hmm.
was a Trinity League heavyweight champion as a sophomore.
Ah,
So after that, that's where he kind of gave up wrestling and focused on football entirely. I think he's a starter, high-end rotation player at the
mm-hmm.
next level. He's got some pretty good speed, pretty good athletic ability. He
Mm-hmm.
flashes the ability to split double teams and get into the backfield. Very strong, very stout build. I mean, you see 6'2.5", 318 is what he measured in at last year at the junior day. And he really tends to attack inside with his hands. He's an inside attacker. So he'll do better against outside punchers,
Yeah.
but he's got strong hands. He holds up there well. For the Bears, he would fit better in their nose tackle position.
Mm-hmm.
Because they play 2 defensive ends, a defensive tackle, and nose tackle tight. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the way that they build out. And with the way that Graham is built, he fits their nose tackle a little bit better than their defensive tackle. You're also a little bit worried with Graham. We're kind of thinking his arms are going to come in a little bit small. He may be right around 32 inches.
Okay.
To put that into perspective, if you're a good enough player, it's not going to matter. Braden Fisk was this guy last year,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, he's in the running for defensive rookie of the year. So Graham's a lot heavier than Fisk is, but he's
Right.
just as talented player and just as technical.
So, out of the other rankings here, obviously this is through from CBS Sports.
Mm-hmm.
The Bears, obviously, one of their biggest need is an interior lineman. The 3 technique obviously was the a massive, massive issue. Zach Pickens wasn't really the guy that they had hoped for at all. if they stick to 4-3 and they want to, draft a legitimate 3 technique, out of the guys listed here, John, who would be a best fit for the, like a legitimate 3 technique position?
Walter Nolan. That
Okay.
guy is a stud. He started his first 2 years at Texas A&M,
Right.
transferred this offseason to Ole Miss, and put together one of the best years of his career. He is an absolute freak of nature.
Mhm.
The biggest thing with him, let's see, I gotta make sure I get my notes right here.
Mhm. Are you worried
Uh,
that maybe he's like a 1-year guy? Obviously transferred, had a hell of a season, but do you feel like a 1-year
no,
wonder or things like that when you look at
no,
things like
no,
that?
not at all. So his 2023 with Texas A&M,
Mm-hmm.
37 tackles, 9 for loss, 4 sacks. This year
Okay.
at Ole Miss, 48 tackles, 14 for loss, 6.5 sacks.
Okay.
So your typical sophomore to junior progression.
Mm-hmm.
He's played like this the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he dropped 25 pounds to play at Ole Miss this year.
Oh.
He was playing bigger at Texas A&M. So reportedly, he ran a 4.99 electric time 40 in high school,
Mm-hmm.
which would be he was 3.20 in high school. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Very strong first step, very strong upper body and just body build in general. He's a good, strong tackler. He's a gap defender. He's very effective rushing his pass lane and keeping his integrity as a pass rusher. He knows when to get aggressive and come off of it. Very, very effective, almost unblockable in 1v1 situations. This is the guy that I love, Walter Nolan. He would be the best fit, I think, for Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
To shore up that 3 tech and get into that, kind of set Pickens and Dexter and Randolph into that rotation.
Right. Andrew Billings is also coming back from an injury as
Yep.
well. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Is he a first rounder right now for you?
Oh yes, I think that CBS is a little bit behind. It's okay. They have a lot of different sports they're trying to cover. It's
That's
okay.
true. That's true. And then once he blows up at the combine, he's going to skyrocket too, obviously.
Well, it might be the Senior Bowl first. He's going down there, because the Senior Bowl now lets
Okay.
juniors come in. So
That's right.
he's going to Mobile.
Absolutely. There's a one more reason, obviously, for a Bears fan like myself to pay close attention to the Senior Bowl now that the juniors are officially been allowed to participate. Yep. My guest tonight is John Vogal, the draft expert from with the Adam Ranks the Sick Network as well. John, obviously, kind of, we had the quarterbacks discussion earlier. This is not a great year for a quarterback, obviously. Obviously, the 2 names that are very high are Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. Tennessee has the number 1 overall pick. You live in Tennessee. You obviously know the disaster that was the Titans this past year with Will Levis. If you had to pick a quarterback, Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, who would it be?
When it comes to the quarterback position, I think I like guys that can that I know what I'm getting.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean, I guess, by that is I know that Shedeur Sanders has played in a pro-style offense, and I know that he is capable of working through progressions and all that.
Right.
I don't know where his upside is. I don't see a whole lot that he's going to get better at his game. But what I do see is he's good enough to play. That would be the guy that I would pick. I'd pick him over Cam Ward,
Okay.
not because Ward isn't a good player in his own right. It's that I would much rather have someone play safe and run our offense than someone kind of get off script and throw a couple interceptions in a game. And that's kind of how I feel about Ward. Is that a lot of times when he starts to feel pressure, he starts to force things because he thinks he can make any throw, which is a good and a bad trait to have in a quarterback. You want to be confident, but you don't want to be overconfident. So I like Shedeur over Cam personally.
Do you think Dion will even allow his son to play in Tennessee, though? That's a big question.
That is a question. I think that it's going to be very interesting to monitor the Cowboys' situation at head coach.
Right.
If Dion takes that job, as it has been speculated,
Sure.
I think it's very difficult to project Dak Prescott being on that roster next year. I understand he's an $81 million cap hit this year. I understand that he's got a no trade clause. But if Dion comes in there and makes it really clear, Dak, we don't want you here, Dak's going to want to go somewhere else, you know?
That's true.
So
That's true.
that's get waived. There's two teams that need quarterbacks right now that could afford Dak Prescott. One straight up outright right now is Vegas. Vegas could do it.
Right.
The other one, with a little bit of finagling and a little bit of help, which Dallas would probably have to offer anyways to move Dak, maybe a $30 million alleviation or something, would be Tennessee.
Mm.
So that would be something that I would be looking for. What does Tennessee do with that number one overall pick? Do they like a quarterback enough in this class? Before Rand Carthen was fired, I know that they really liked Cam Ward. Now that you've got a brand new GM that was hired today, is coming over from Kansas City.
Right.
That may
The
not
Mike
be the case.
Borgonzi?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, Mike Borganzi, I believe that's his name. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now, speaking of Cam Ward, he is an intriguing prospect. And, my longtime co-host, Ken Fang, who's a long-suffering Browns fans, I know the Giants need a quarterback as well. Maybe some other team might be desperate enough to move up and, get a quarterback. Does Cam Ward fit the, whether the Browns or Giants or any other team maybe looking to move up and, desperate enough to get one?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of teams that are going to have interest in Ward. Even as I'm sitting here kind of downplaying him a little bit, there's a lot of teams that are going to have interest in him.
Your family will dream about.
The reason for that is because of the big plays that he can make. That pushes you upwards.
Right.
He does make some throws that you're sitting there like I don't know. I've never seen a throw like that. I don't know how that got made.
Right.
He does do that. So there will be teams that are interested in him. You have to kind of have a spread scheme for him. He's also always played in an air raid system, so you're going to be worried about how he reads the field a little bit.
Right.
But yeah, Cleveland could definitely be in the running. I think the Giants could definitely be in the running. Tennessee's probably still in the running. I don't know where they are leaning. We'll figure that out as the process goes along. I know that the odds-on favorite is that Tennessee likes Cam. And then the Raiders are also in this somehow too.
That's right.
Because they're going to need a quarterback as well. And free agency, it looks like your best offering is going to be Sam Darnold.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's going to do it, but who's going to do it? That's the question, But no, there's going to be, you're going to see a couple quarterbacks get overdrafted for sure. That's going to happen.
Now we're looking at the list here. The best of the best. Ewers, Dart, McCord, Rourke, Leonard, Will Howard. Do you see any sleepers that might be get overdrafted out of the list here? I know a lot of people are saying Kyle McCord is quietly moving up for a phenomenal season he had at Syracuse. Do you buy Kyle McCord after the numbers he put up at his only season at Syracuse? Or do you look at Jackson Dart and say, people are sleeping on him because of obviously the offense that he played under Lane Kiffin and that he might have a better shot at being in the NFL?
No, I don't buy the Dart. And then, there's it. The Lane Kiffin created a great offense. It's very easy for a quarterback to read and run.
Right.
And that's really hurt their progression to the next level. I don't see Dart being that guy. McCord is going to work his way up some boards. One of the things that really hurt him was the game that Syracuse played that had the most NFL scouts at it. He threw 4 interceptions in the first half. That's the one thing that's going to kind of hurt him. That impression is going to be left in a lot
What
of
game was
people's
that? I'm trying
minds.
to remember.
I could tell you here in a second.
Okay.
Because I got to pull
I
that up.
remember that game very specifically, and because it was all over Twitter and people were bemoaning about that.
It was at Boston College, I think, 37-31 because they lost it. I think that was the week it was. But no, that's going to be left in a lot of scouts' minds, that impression from that game, that they're not going to be too happy. Maybe, I think it was Boston College. I have to go back and look for sure.
That's true. I remember that one.
Yeah. So that was the game that most NFL scouts were at. That they were more there than any other game they played this year. So that kind of hurts you. I think the other thing too is he had a decent year at Ohio State, but you really saw his issues when he gets pressured.
Right.
That's going to hurt him as well a little bit, is that, he's got good tools, not great, doesn't work through pressure very well. Typically those types of guys, they used to go, third, fourth round, think Kirk Cousins. Now sometimes they'll slide up into the second or first, it just kind of depends.
Okay. Did Quinn Ewers made a mistake?
Yes, I think he did. And he still has time to correct it. He can still technically go back. I know that he made the list of players that have declared. He can go back. That is absolutely on the table.
One of the things I'm sorry about, when I'm watching Quinn Ewers, and obviously I've seen plenty of him on television, one of the things that bothered me about watching Quinn Ewers is that his ball isn't, crisp or like a fastball. It's like like a slow touch that every time he throws the ball, and that kind of like bothered me. Do you see that similar issues that a lot of us amateurs see, and do you think that's correctable?
Yeah, I see it, and no, it's not usually something that's too correctable. What it is it could be one of two things, and one is his arm talent is not as great. He doesn't have as strong of an arm. There's not too much that you can do to that, especially when you look at his mechanics. He's pretty solid with his platform and everything, usually. The other issue that could be is that his hands are a little bit small. So that's another thing to kind of keep an eye on. When he measures in at the Senior Bowl. We've seen people opt out of measurements before, so maybe they'll make us wait to the combine. Who knows? If that happens, then we already know. But yeah, I think that he did make a mistake. He had a chance to. He wasn't going to go back to Texas because Arch Manning is, banging at the gates to play. But he had a chance to go. I believe I heard. I'm not sure. I'm going to go ahead and say it. North Carolina offered him upwards of $8 million to come play there.
So I heard, yes.
So that was he turned that down. He's not going to make nearly that going in the draft this year. I think that you could potentially see him drop into the third, fourth round. But he probably needed one more year. He could have had a really good year somewhere, played in a different offense, put up some numbers, come into next year as a first overall pick, and now you're looking at second, third, fourth round.
A couple more minutes with John Vogal, the draft expert, joining me on the Double A Team podcast live stream tonight. John, let's look at the college football championship. Who do you like and why?
I like Notre Dame.
Really?
And there's a couple reasons for it, and I want to be very clear about describing the idea that I'm trying to impress. I think the first thing is Notre Dame, for the first time, I think in their history, has the body types to match up with Big Ten SEC schools, especially with how the SEC and the Big Ten have progressed, right? Which is NFL body types. Notre Dame, for the first time, really has NFL body types all up and down their offensive and defensive line. So physically, they're going to be able to match Ohio State. Now, the second key factor that I'm looking at here is head coach Marcus Freeman has done something that is very rare and something that I'm not sure I've ever seen in my lifetime at the college level. And that's he's brought this team together through their Christian faith, which I think is absolutely incredible. That's the hardest way to bring a team together. You could bring a team together through, hey, we've all been through the shit, and this is hard, and we are all in it together, like the Army kind of does it, right? You can bring a team together by motivating them through their families, through their friends, through incentives. There's all kinds of different ways to do it, but faith, Christian faith, that's one of the hardest ways to do it. So everybody's on the same page with it. And then the third factor is he's brought back the Notre Dame tradition of players attending mass before a game. Take out the whole spiritual significance of Catholic faith, mass. If you're a willing participant in a church service, in mass, that provides a very positive psychological effect to you, where you focus, it calms your nerves, and those are going to be advantages. So if they've got the body types to match up and the physicality match up with Ohio State, and they come out there and they run the ball on Ohio State and they can play with them in both sides of the football, they're going to have the advantage psychologically and physically throughout the entire game. I think it's going to be close, but I like Notre Dame.
Now, out of the quarterbacks in that game, Will Howard and Riley Leonard, who do you like better as an NFL prospect?
I like Will Howard better. They're both probably developmental 3 quarterbacks at the next level, which means you bring them on the roster, they'll be either your game day inactive third quarterback, emergency quarterback, or they'll be on your practice squad. Riley Leonard has a lot to develop as a passer, but his legs and the way that they use him in the quarterback run really helped that offense. Will Howard, on the other hand, capable athlete, pretty good arm. But again, he's thrown to a great group of receivers. I mean, Jeremiah Smith might be the most impressive freshman we've seen. That might change next year if you see who Oregon's got coming this year. Oh my God. But Jeremiah Smith and Abuka, who's going to be in this class as well, and the tight end help that they've had this year has been incredible. So I think that he probably has some processing as well to work on, but they're both developmental 3s to the next level. I like Howard a little bit better because he's a better passer.
Let's touch on the NFL. Obviously, the head coaching search is still very much up in the air, except New England. Dallas, you still think it's Dion?
Yeah, I started talking about this 3 months ago, and it just made sense. It's kind of a gut feeling. I mean, I still could be wrong, obviously, but it's interesting. He could think about prime time going to America's team. Jerry Jones loves to market things. The other thing that Jerry Jones has, the other thing that Jerry Jones has going on right now is he's going to be 82 next year or this season.
This could be his last head coaching hiring.
And this could also be his legacy. His legacy right now is he bought the Cowboys and they never won the Super Bowl. That's his legacy. I don't think he wants to go out that way. So he may be much more willing to hand the reins over to somebody.
Yeah.
And Dion very well could have proven in a couple of years in Colorado that he's capable of taking over reins like that in Jerry's mind. And I think that's one that makes most sense there.
I'm a Bears fan, and we're all kind of freaked out about the head coaching search right now. So far, we have not met the the Rooney Rule yet. I know Ron Rivera is the only guy who had been brought in for in person. We still need to bring in another minority coaching candidate. in person to meet the rule. Obviously, Ben Johnson is our number one hope, but we're kind of accepting the idea of, Mike McCarthy or Todd Monken, and if I had to pick out of the two, I think my preference would be Todd Monken because of the work he has done at Georgia as an OC, and then his last 2 years with Baltimore with Lamar Jackson. What he has done is simply amazing. Outside of Ben Johnson, Todd Monken or Mike McCarthy, it's not about maybe who's better or not, but either one would be a good hire, right? I like to think so.
I think McCarthy has always kind of been the give me the players and I'll coach them, coach.
Right.
He doesn't get too involved in front office personnel decisions, so that may be a way that Ryan Poles would like to go.
Mm-hmm. But it's always kind of like we're settling for something. It's kind of like a high floor, low ceiling is probably the best way to describe a guy like Mike McCarthy if you hire. You could get maybe 11, 12 wins like he did with Cowboys, but you're not going to go too far. Maybe in the press, right?
It's difficult because everybody's looking for the next, Sean McVay,
or Kyle Shanahan. Yes,
yeah, Kyle Shanahan. Well, here's the thing: Sean McVay's and Kyle Shanahan's are found in every corner of the world.
True.
The problem is the world's round. You know what I mean? So those guys are anomalies. You can't be looking for the next guy. You got to be looking for, okay, who's going to come in here, fit the culture? That's the first thing. You got to fit the culture that we want to build. And who is going to put the players into the most successful position that they can?
Right.
To me, in experience that from watching these teams kind of come together, and that these coaches have produced, I think Monken is probably a better option too. And the reason for that is because McCarthy almost gets set in a scheme. There's certain guys, they prefer their scheme. They like their scheme. They're looking for players to fit their scheme.
Sure.
While McCarthy doesn't get involved as much in the player personnel, he's very much his scheme oriented. He has his scheme and that's what he wants to run. Monken, on the other hand, you look at what he did at Georgia with Stetson Bennett.
Yes.
They won a couple national championships down there. I don't know if you were watching or not, but it happened.
Yeah.
He comes up here to Baltimore, and first time he's really ever had a running quarterback like Lamar Jackson, figures out how to incorporate him into an offense without keeping the same scheme that he kept at Georgia. It was very different. So, and then follows it back up this year with, okay, now we got Derrick Henry. Now we've got Lightning and Lamar Jackson and Thunder and Derrick Henry. We got a right guard that plays at 380 pounds and a 300-pound fullback. We could go power, then we can spread you out and run the ball on you. So he uses his personnel really, really well.
Yeah.
Both of those guys, you have to have a good defensive mind in your at your coordinator position to kind of take over the defense. Right. But both of those guys have shown the ability to come in there and work with the talent they have and screw scheme. We got to figure out how are we going to put the players in the best position to be successful. Right. And I think that's why you're probably going to see Baltimore take down Buffalo this week.
Okay. Yeah, I'm impressed with Monken, obviously, because of his work, making Lamar Jackson from a running quarterback into like a real good to great pocket passer. At some point, as Lamar gets older, his body's going to start to break down. He can't keep on running forever. And
that's a great point you bring up, because I'm not trying to interrupt you here, but this plays into it. The last 2 seasons, Lamar's been healthy while Monken's been there. And the previous 4 seasons before that, he had 1 season he played all the games. So Monken's doing a great job keeping him upright as well and keeping him in the game. Because that was the concern I had this year, where it was like week 11, week 12, week 13. I'm like, did Lamar Jackson get hurt yet? Did it happen? Did it happen? It didn't. He made it 2 years under Monken, and Monken was able to keep him in the game. I think that speaks volumes.
That's true. That's true. I think that because of the body of work he did with Lamar Jackson, I think he would be an excellent hire for the Bears. He's a local. He's from Wheaton, Illinois, not far outside of Chicago, and I think that age gets kicked around a little bit. Ben Johnson's 35. Todd Monken is old enough to be his father at 59 or 60 years old. But. Yeah. I would rather take my chances with Todd Monken because, Mike McCarthy, I understand, he also called plays and, like you said, I think it's a little bit more of a coach who is dependent on his schemes more so than anything else. And, I do worry that, this is his third hire, third head coaching gig. Maybe this is similar to John Fox 2.0, obviously. Mike McCarthy is a little more accomplished than John Fox when he was hired. But, I do hope that, the Bears are doing their due diligence. And I know Monken interviewed with the Bears today, thankfully. And hopefully he will be one of the finalists when it's all said and done. A couple more spots. Raiders, is it Ben Johnson for you?
I think Ben might take the job in Jacksonville.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I've been hearing a lot about him.
Balky?
Well, that's the thing is they're listening to any ideas with Balky, including letting him go. And they made that very clear. Shad Khan made that very clear in the press conference when they announced that they were moving on from Doug Peterson.
But let me interrupt you, John. I know there was a conflicting report that Johnson would not want to do that because Johnson was seen as a villainous person as a first-time head coach, having such, wielding power, like he's forcing Balky out, even though we know that Trent Balky is a terrible GM. Do you buy that notion, or is that just basically hogwash?
No. So Balky has a reputation in the NFL, and it's spread into the media, so now it's kind of common knowledge. You're not fooling anybody with the whole, he ran Trent Balky out. No, that's not even going to ever be a narrative. But I think that he likes the situation down there a little bit better because Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback that you'd be working with. Mm-hmm. There's some offensive tools to work with there. Like Brian Thomas Jr. is pretty darn incredible. Yeah. You probably have something with that running back combination in, the Auburn, Tank Big.
Etienne, yeah.
Yeah, you got something there. So there's a lot more to work with in Jacksonville right now than there is in Las Vegas. So I think that would probably be his top option. Okay. With Vegas, what I've been hearing about Vegas is it's probably Pete Carroll that gets it there.
Oh, okay.
Pete Carroll's been trying to come back into coaching. He felt like he was forced out too early of Seattle. Yeah. Where Seattle felt like they needed to make that move. He still wants to coach. And with the respect that he has across the league and with Tom Brady's influence over the Raiders right now as well, very good chance that Pete Carroll will be a 3-4 year stop head coach for the Raiders.
Do you buy that Tom Brady's involvement with the Raiders and doing Fox games? Does that bother you, or you're like, nah?
No. I think that you want to have your hand in as many pots as you possibly can, especially if you're going to take a $340 million deal from Fox. Invest that money wisely. He put it into a team. I think that's pretty wise right now with the way the NFL continues to grow. And, you have a chance here with your legacy. Yeah. Beyond the football, what you did on the field, now you could create a legacy off the field. If the Raiders come back, and they build themselves the next couple of years with an identity and become a competitive team again, and eventually maybe win a championship, everybody's going to point at Tom Brady as being the savior of Vegas. That continues to add your legacy, and I don't think that him calling games Fox doesn't normally carry the AFC games anyways. So I don't see a lot of conflict there. But no, stay involved. Stay involved in the game is any way that you possibly can. I know I've got my hands in a lot of different pots as well. So
Right. Let's look at the two other vacancies. Saints, is it Aaron Glenn?
yeah, that's what it sounds like. That would be his preference.
I
And
thought he was the Jets. I know because I'm mentioning both clubs because obviously Aaron Glenn obviously has ties to both organizations.
yeah. So I think the biggest thing about Glenn is he's a guy that likes to coach, and he's a coach, like a player's
Mhm.
coach. You go to the Jets, and you really can't do that. Woody Johnson is always interfering. It's not a great place to go right now. Whereas you're going to have the full support of the ownership in New Orleans. You've got a lot of bright minds working in that front office right now. I know that Randy Mueller just went back. Jeff Ireland's up there. There's a lot of really good guys up there that are working in that football department. So you have an opportunity with the cap situation that they have. I know that that's not very impressive. They figure it out every year somehow. They're going to figure it out again. Like I've talked to guys that work for the Saints and they say, I don't know how our guy does it, but he does it every year and we just keep scouting. So it gives Glenn the best opportunity to coach and not have so many different factors involved with it that make it almost impossible to do that.
Right. And finally, where do you see the Jets turning now, if that's the case?
Oh man, your options are so limited.
Right. They got to hire the GM too, as well. So
that's also going to be the key. I think we probably want to hire the GM first and let them come in there and pick their head coach. Will the Jets do that? Most likely not. But I got to look at my interview chart. Joe Brady could definitely be in the running, I think.
okay.
I don't think he's gotten as much interest around the rest of the league. I know he's done a few interviews, but that could be the place where he ends up going. And Brady, they're going to have to figure out their quarterback situation, obviously, because Rodgers is probably not coming back. Yeah. That was an interesting year that we just had with them. So you're going to have to figure that out. And I think that's the other thing, too, that really that's going to make the coaching situation so hard there, too.
That's true.
You're going to have Jordan Travis under contract next year.
Yeah.
You got a lot to figure out. So, but Joe Brady's a bright guy, and he's one of the dudes that I think could actually salvage something and put it together.
Are you hearing anything about Brian Flores and his obviously the lawsuits against the league and his time in Miami and the handling of Tua? Do you think he's a changed man, or do you feel like that's not gonna happen?
I think the biggest thing with the NFL, just from my experience and observing this stuff, is when you go in there and you mess with their money, it's very difficult to come back from that.
Right.
I know that he's done some interviews this offseason. I know he's done a couple.
Right.
I don't see them being very, I don't see him coming in for second interviews. I think that it's kind of a, hey, let's talk to this guy. Hate to say it, but Rooney Rule requirement gets filled, gets checked off,
Right.
And I think that's more so what it is. He's a great defensive coordinator. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But there are still questions about his ability to be a head coach, especially with the way Miami got handled.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of respect for him. I ran into him a couple of years at the Combine, and I told him that myself when he was suing the league, and so, but no, he's a great defensive mind for sure. I don't think anybody's taking him too seriously as a head coach prospect.
Right. I pray that the Bears don't hire him. Obviously, we already went through that with a defensive coach. Ryan Poles and Flores has a relationship back in the Boston College, and I just hope that for Caleb Williams' sake, they don't hire another defensive coach who's going to probably have a difficulty of hiring an OC. If he succeeds, he goes elsewhere, and we're back to square one again. Obviously, Josh McCown's name was linked, but apparently Josh isn't interested in being an OC at this juncture. So, like you said, obviously maybe Flores is a candidate to require a Rooney Rule. So, it is what it is, unfortunately. So, hopefully he gets a shot elsewhere, but maybe hopefully just stay as far as away from my Chicago Bears. But John, thank you very much for your time. First live stream for 2025, and your story. Obviously, that was on Twitter. Obviously, John, shared his struggles and experience of getting where he is. You can follow John's Twitter at Draft Vogal to follow John's work and his stories there. It was very, very inspirational. If you're just joining us late, we spent about 25 minutes about his journey, his struggles, and as somebody, who got in without playing a single football growing up as well, and obviously getting into scouting and everything. So, if you're into that kind of stuff, I hope you go to our YouTube channel and, spend 30 minutes listening to John's story there. John, thank you very much. Have a great weekend, and I look forward to having you on again, maybe close to the draft time, when the free agency gets settled, and obviously the coaching hires and GMs, all those things are settled down, and maybe we could have you on again either after the combine and then maybe early April, just a few weeks before the NFL draft. Thank you very much for your time. Once again, have a great weekend, and I look forward to having you on again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Have a great night.